So I wanted to shoot a quick video on happiness and using personality type in order to enhance our lives and enhance the lives of people around us. So there are two different paths that come to mind when we embark on this journey. One of which is fairly illuminated. It seems like the logical path to go down in many ways, but little do we know at the time that this is a path that is cyclical. It goes round and round in circles. It seems to never end, and eventually we realize that we keep coming back to the place we were at the beginning. So what path am I talking about here? I'm talking about the path that begins when we do this random online test that our friends shared on Facebook or something. We do the test, we get our results, and then we resonate with these results. We see ourselves in the type description. We don't necessarily look at other type descriptions. We just take our results at face value, and then we embark on justifying those results. We inherit a cognitive bias whereby we interpret everything that happens to us from that point through the filter of our personality type. So when we do these online tests, and I'm not referring to the actual MBTI instrument here, by the way, I'm talking about the most popular websites that will give you a personality type. We don't necessarily understand the underlying mechanics and what the site is actually about in the first place. So let's just take a business model approach. We're going to create a website. We want this to be the best personality typing website. And when we say best, we're talking about something that can be measured on a graph. So let's just talk about view potential. Let's talk about how much money can we make from getting views, how much money can we make from getting shares and engagement from our audience. So then we'll employ some kind of bastardization of the MBTI instrument, and then we'll put all of our efforts into creating type descriptions that no matter what person receives them, they will resonate with people. Why would we do this? Because we want to make sure when using an instrument that has at best 50% accuracy, that even when people get the wrong result, they will still feel rewarded and they will still feel compelled to share it with their friends and to attest to the validity of the instrument that they're using. And as such, websites that veer on the more sensationalistic side in order to appeal to the most people they possibly can will employ the Barnum effect. What is the Barnum effect? This is something that's been observed largely in astrology, whereby people are given a description of their day. They're given a description of who they are, of their, perfect romance. And these descriptions are rather methodically created in order to be both ubiquitous and individualized. And as such, you will take a situation or you'll take a personality trait and you'll describe this trait as if it's rare to a specific person. Because you're describing it in a certain way, whoever reads it will feel like you're talking about them in a way which makes them stand out among other people. The reality, though, is that people are resonating with universal human traits. So let's say somebody does a test online. I'm not going to name specific websites, but they do the test, they do the questions, and they get the result. They get an INFJ result, let's just say, for the sake of argument, because it seems a lot of people get this result. What do we get? We have someone who's being described as quiet, harmonious, peace-loving, expressive in their love. They seek an idealized version of the world. They're idealistic by nature. They want good things to happen to them. And they simultaneously feel vulnerable to psychopaths and narcissists. So what do we have here? Do we have a type code? Do we have something that's describing a cognitive stack, a way of thinking? Or do we have a bunch of universal human traits that are described in such a way as to make it seem like these traits are unique, that these traits are rare? And I mean, the INFJ is purportedly one of the rarest types, so what better way to employ the Barnum effect in order to maximize audience responsiveness, in order to maximize shares? Because all you have to do is you describe a bunch of universal human traits, universal human vulnerabilities, and then you add the term rare to it. So that means in this specific instance, the Barnum effect is amplified. The effectiveness of this website is amplified. because people are not only getting a universal human description that is specifically tailored to make it seem unique to them, but they're also receiving a statistic that proves this to be not only a rare trait, not only an individualized trait, but actually hyper-individualized, hyper-rare, 1 to 2% of the population. So wow, not only am I feeling an affinity, a resonance with this type description, not only am I feeling justified in my strengths and vindicated in my weaknesses, but I am simultaneously feeling like more of an individual than I was before the test. I'm simultaneously feeling rare and special. And don't get me wrong, I don't care how skilled the creators of these websites are, there's no way they can make every single one of the 16 personality types both universal and highly individualized. There's no way they can employ the Barnum effect that effectively. But the thing is, they don't have to. So all they need to do is ensure the instrument is accurate to about 4 degrees. So let's say if an INFP does a test, they could get anything from ISFP, INFJ, INFP, and let's say ENFP. So there we go, 4 types. So you don't need to make every single one of the 16 types applicable to this person, to their personality, to their Big 5 score. But what you do need to make sure is the INFJ, INFP, ISFP, maybe ENFP results are fairly similar. There's a lot of overlap between them. They both employ the Barnum effect in order to ensure that whoever gets these results, even if they're one of the other 4 types, they will still feel an equal amount of resonance with the type description they received. So this is where we get to the cyclical part of this road that we're going along at the moment. Because the person receives a result, they, because of the popularity of this particular website, because of all the shares it's getting, they consecrate the instrument. They assume that because they did a test and because the test is popular, it must have an authority, it must be qualified, it must really know what it's doing. The people behind it must be not only professional businessmen and marketers, but they also must be professional typologists. There must be some kind of specific magic formula that ensures any test they do is going to give them an accurate rating. That ensures any test they do is going to give them the type that they absolutely must be. So somebody comes away with a type result. They probably share the website with their friends to the benefit of the people who create the website, which creates that pattern going and going. And then they also come away with a high amount of emotional investment and belief, faith in the test that they just employed. So not only does somebody come away with a type, but they also come away with a kind of a zeal, a kind of unrelenting faith in the accuracy of the instrument. Because if they were to lose any of that faith in the instrument, if they were to risk losing faith in that mechanism that gave them this gift would lose its value. They will feel less affinity, they will feel less secure in themselves, because as soon as you have something, you don't want to let it go. So the person uses this type as a kind of filter. They filter everything that happens to them through this point, through this kind of glaze. They see everything that happens to them and they relate it to the type code. What happens is they take to the YouTube comments, they take to forums, they take to Facebook communities, they take to Twitter, they take to Reddit, etc. And they start explaining the type code to people. And they start saying, this thing has happened to me because I'm this type. This person doesn't like me because I'm this type. I'm incompatible with this person because I'm this type. I'm not getting a promotion because I'm this type. You can see where this is going, can't you? So they're employing this kind of rigid attitude, and then they're looking for continuous sources of affirmation for the attitude. So let's say I'm an INFJ, I don't like narcissists, I don't like psychopaths. I feel easily manipulated by people because they are taking my good will, my good graces for granted. I feel like I don't fit in anywhere. I feel like I'm overly idealistic. I feel like I'm so introverted. I'm so trapped in my thoughts all the time. I feel like no one will ever truly understand me. So this is the INFJ spiel. If I really wanted to, and then I'll be applying this filter to everything. So let's say something bad occurs to me. Somebody hurts me. So I'll take to a community of like-minded people. And I'll seek justification. I'll seek other people's affirmation for how something bad that happened to me relates directly back to my type description. And then I develop a sort of an evasive disorder, whereby I've been told by other people with similar stories to myself that I need to evade certain kinds of people, that I need to evade certain situations, that I should only ever live this specific kind of insular existence. And then then I'll begin to shut out people who disagree with that. I'll tend to shut out people who tell me to take responsibility for myself, they tell me to take the type code with a grain of salt. I'm going to employ this type code I've received as a kind of filter to explain everything that happens to me. I will use this filter to justify my weaknesses and vindicate my strengths. I'll use this filter to ensure that I funnel myself into this narrow pathway, avoid certain kinds of people, and gravitate towards others. I'll begin to lock myself within insular communities that will affirm me, and I'll begin to distance myself from people who would contradict me. I'll begin to develop the attitude that nobody understands me, that no job is ever really suited to my idealism. And I'll essentially begin to use type to justify everything that's wrong with me, while also relying on an external kind of thing in order to justify who I am, to explain who I am, and to essentially take control of my life on my behalf. So this is where the path begins to turn around. We've been going forward so far, and then suddenly we seem to be going backwards without knowing it. We have this type, we have this belief in our type, we have this belief in that benign entity that has handed us this type. And then we'll begin to place an equal amount of faith in people of the same type, people with the same complex that we're currently developing. Everything that will happen to us from this point will be seen through a filter of this really generic type description that we received from the internet. Let's take the INFJ again. I had a bad situation at work. I think this is because the person doesn't understand me. It's not because I failed to communicate, though. It's because nobody can understand me at a fundamental level, because I am 1 to 2% of the population. I didn't get this job I was going for. I didn't get this promotion I was going for. And it's not because I failed to employ a perfectly natural extroverted sensing in order to focus in on details and ground myself in reality that any type can do if they want to. No, it's because I've been told this is my inferior function. Therefore, I cannot do it. And the type description must be correct, because it made me feel good. And it made other people feel good as well. So much that they shared it with their friend. Therefore, it really must be onto something. Oh, I've been feeling really depressed recently. Oh, wait, I read online that this type's supposed to be depressed anyway. Oh, that's okay then. And that must be correct because I received this result from the test I did on the internet that everyone was sharing. So I must be predisposed towards depression, predisposed towards social ostracism, and predisposed towards general career failure. So what happens is you go on this journey, you get your type result, you apply the filter, and then you go back to home base. What's home base? Home base is your echo chamber. Home base is this little hub you have on YouTube or whatever, whereby everybody thinks the same things you do. And everybody will confirm that every bad thing that's happening to you is because of your type code and the type code of a person you're supposed to be incompatible with. And then you have a choice. You can either go for round 2 and do the same thing again, or you can start digging into the theory behind it. We can start looking into the intricacies, the actual mechanisms. And through this process, you'll begin to see that original test that you consecrated wasn't so good after all. And you begin to see that tests as a whole, no matter how good they are, will only give you about, 60% accuracy rating as an average. Probably less in most cases, but let's say they're a good one, it'll be about 60%. And you'll begin to understand that the only person who can truly know you is you. You can consult a professional. You can consult someone who knows what they're doing, who knows the theory inside and out. Even if they have their own unique approach, they'll still have a good objective understanding of the ins and outs of the underlying theory. And then this person will give you some possible types. You'll have a bounce back and forth with the person, and then through your own understanding of yourself and their understanding of the behavior that you may not necessarily be aware of, you will come to a type, if not the first time, then probably the second time, that will be your true cognitive type. And because of your understanding of the cognitive functions by this point, you will see whether this matches up. You will see the consistencies, you'll see the inconsistencies. I don't care what type you are, any human being can understand the theory, any human being can be objective about themselves. And suddenly we have this new path that seems to be never ending. And as much as that might lead us to despair, when will this path ever end? When will I ever be at this paradise I've been seeking my entire life? We'll also be aware of the fact that this path is going forwards. This path is going upwards constantly. This path isn't going around in circles. This path isn't one of inertia, but rather a path of continuous self-development. And if you are wondering what happiness is, and if eternity is such a thing, then this will probably be the closest approximation. This is probably true happiness, a path that never ends, yet yields happiness at an exponential rate. The further along this path you go, with a few undulations along the way, of course, the happier you become, the more fulfilled you become, and the happier you are able to make the people around you. And then you realize truth. It isn't this fixed binary concept, but rather something which fluctuates, that's fluid. You realize that a year ago your understanding of the theory wasn't as good as it is now. You realize that 5 years' time you're going to look back at the person you are now and weep. Not because the person you are now is inferior or because they're worse, but because in 5 years' time you're so much further ahead. In 5 years' time you've realized so much more truth than you had at this point. And the more you begin to realize that type, knowing oneself, the individuation process, isn't this on and off switch. It isn't in black and white kind of you either are or you aren't, but rather this kind of constant progression. I'm going to go down this path. I'm going to learn more about myself. I'm going to learn more about other people. And I'm going to take every situation that happens to me in a fluid and positive manner. There are always going to be situations which are just horrendous. There are always going to be situations that there is no good to be taken from them. They cannot be perceived under any circumstances as a good thing. But the majority of circumstances, no matter how bad they might seem to be, will always have a way in which one can take them and convert them into a positive energy. One can transmutate the energies you've received from this negative circumstance and turn them into something benign to help you, to help the lives of other people. And then you begin to understand what type is all about. Type isn't about having this filter to look at everything through. Type isn't about inheriting this cognitive bias whereby you're continuously trying to justify you being this type rather than another type, but rather an understanding of how your mind works, an understanding of the ways in which you can adapt to any situation you find yourself in. And the more you begin to realize no type is any better than any other type, and the more you begin to be grateful for knowing what your true type is. Because with this understanding of your own cognitive processes, you no longer need to embody this archetype, and you are suddenly given the mechanisms through which to become the person you always wanted to be. You no longer need to live in this delusion of, I am this person because this type corresponds with this type description, and therefore there are only 16 possible people I can be on planet Earth. But rather you realize that every single person is an individual, and type does not correlate directly with personality. Any type can become any personality that they want. Any type can do anything that they want. Sometimes the journey's harder, sometimes the journey's longer. But the true purpose of type isn't to embody an archetype, but rather to surpass the boundaries of your mind. To realize that type isn't an end in and of itself, but rather a means to overcome your natural limitations. Yes, every type has a niche. Every cognitive stack is specifically geared towards excelling at one thing at the expense of another. But conversely, every function is able to surrender to its opposite. My introverted intuition is able to surrender to my extrovert sensing to such a degree as to whereby I'm actively influencing the concrete situation to the betterment of myself and others, while using my introverted intuitive vision and understanding of reality in order to supplement my concrete experience. And if a type were to become something which someone would not ordinarily assume they would become, this doesn't mean that the type is going to be inferior at this thing they weren't initially predisposed to do, but quite the opposite. This type will have a means of doing something that nobody else has. This type will have a unique method that they can employ within this field dominated by other types. And not only that, this type will have acquired the ability to adapt to any circumstance and change themselves according to the context of the situation in order to become better and in order to do anything that they want to do. This person will be stronger for it. So when I say personality type and happiness, I'm not talking about an understanding of our archetype. I'm not talking about an understanding of our strengths and weaknesses. I'm not talking about avoiding one thing and doing something else instead. But rather I'm talking about an understanding of our innate cognitive processes and how to adapt to any situation we find ourselves in. As an INFJ, it is the understanding of my innate cognitive processes that will allow me to contribute on an equal level to an extrovert thinker. That will enable me to swivel between extrovert feeling, my authority function, and extrovert thinking according to the needs of the situation. And I can only do this not through willpower, not through force of will, but rather through allowing my extroverted feeling to surrender to my extrovert thinking. By allowing myself to care less about the social harmony while I work together with others in order to focus on a mechanical task at hand. And it's through an understanding of these underlying cognitive processes that we can take any energy that we receive from the external world and turn it into something positive. It is through an understanding of how our mind innately operates that we can seize control, we can seize autonomy, and construct ourselves in order to adapt to any new emerging stimuli and in order to better become the person we always wanted to be. But can a personality type allow us to gradually become more happy? Yes, absolutely. Any system that gives us a deeper understanding of how we operate as individuals, that empowers us with the tools we need to achieve a greater sense of autonomy, can lead to a greater fulfillment of self, can enable a person to succeed whereby they would have previously failed, can enable a person to actively empathize, even if just on an intellectual level, with the circumstances of another person. And it is through understanding of ourselves, of others, of life as a whole, that we can become more than what we were yesterday, that we can continue to evolve, to build upon what we have previously made, and continue moving forward along this path of eternal self-growth. So thank you so much for watching that. I hope it was enjoyable. If you haven't already done so, click that subscribe button below to stay notified of future content. I upload at least one video every single week, and I'll be seeing you all next time. See you later.